back then when you had real, true hardship, you didn't have time to sit down there or to sit around and think of ways to figure out how you were oppressed. So with that being said, let's jump right into it, David. Today's meme to be destroyed. Thank you. Nameless, faceless commenter over on Twitter who sent this to us. We have a tweet from a Twitter account.
By the way, that wasn't a nameless, faceless commenter.
It's not the same nameless, faceless person. If you want your name and face said on the show,
or just your name,
the tweet given to us,
we can delineate between the two.
We're more than happy to do that, but not everybody does. So anyway, a tweet from a Twitter account called No Context Brits. And boy, if that isn't an apropos name, because this meme needs a lot of context or else it looks like the facile, bullshit that it is. Anyway, there's a picture of medieval serfs planting their fields. And the tweet says,
they
quote,
serfed in medieval times?
Yeah, they were totally gnarly, bro. The tweet says, and I quote, medieval peasants worked only about 150 days in a year. The church believed it was important to keep them happy with frequent, mandatory holidays. You have less holidays than a medieval peasant.
They probably spent most of their day off on YouTube on their phone.
Probably. That's what I would have done with my days off. I try not to do that now. I try to read, self, improve on a regular basis.
The Secret?
But,
you read The Secret?
Sometimes the tubes just draw me in.
Yeah. You know what I do with my phone?
What?
Back in medieval times?
Not die of Black Death.
I'd check out how many people died that day of Black Death, and I'd just be like, well, I'm going to move to another township real quick. And then right before I do that, I go incognito and make sure I get one last one out of the way. Anywho.
So we've seen iterations of this sort of commentary all over the place, and it's always coming from lefty pages. I don't know from this, just the name of the Twitter, No Context Brits, I don't know if they're a lefty page or not, but I've seen memes similar to this shared on other repeat offenders like the other 98%, Occupy Democrats, et cetera, et cetera. And the obvious implication here is your life is worse off than a medieval peasant because they had 150 days off, and capitalism is this terrible thing that has you enslaved to consumerism such that you get no days off a year and you're miserable and your life sucks, and wouldn't it be great if only you were working for a feudal lord? That's the implication.
Well, the lefties, I mean, are they aware that the Obamacare was a little lax back then? The healthcare practices back then, very medieval, shall we say?
Yeah, bloodletting and leeches were
was that covered under your PPO,
treatments.
Or did you have to go over to your what was your deductible back then? Was it just the first part of your leg and then the second part of your leg covered the first part of your leg, or was it your owner?
Yeah, God forbid you got a mild scratch that got infected, or else you were either going to die of gangrene or lose a limb.
Like that? No, like nowadays you scratch your toe, your mom freaks out and tells you to put fucking Neosporin on it, and then like whatever antibacterial salve or
that
lotion.
Would be Neosporin.
Well, I mean, you clean it first. You put the peroxide on it, and then you hit it with the Neosporin.
Yeah,
I might have got a little fakakta. Might have got a little out of order. Want to bear with me for a second? Trying to work through this thing live and in living color. But my whole point being is like literally, if you broke your ankle, you were super screwed back then.
Yeah.
So I should say, working 150 days. By the way, all those work days. We're not like, oh, I went to the desk and I sent some emails and I checked my emails and then I texted Tina what she wants to do with this group project that we're working on. Then I went to the coffee and I had a cup of coffee and I talked about the game last night and how super depressed I was. And then I went back and I did a couple of emails, then I took about a 30-minute shit and got paid for it. And then I had lunch. And then my tummy was a little upset around 3 o'clock. Then I went home.
It's a nice play. Nice day in the life of David.
I don't live that life. Don't hit me with that life.
But, first of all, just on the surface level, the dipshittery flowing through the point that's trying to be made here is almost too much to bear, right? The idea that medieval peasants had 150 days off a year is just patently absurd because, as you know, before about the 1820s or 30s, when global poverty started falling off a cliff, human beings, this normal state of affairs from the Stone Age all the way up to medieval times and shortly thereafter, people were barely living above subsistence. So what 150 days off means is that you're not going to work for your feudal lord or not going off to be marching into the fields to get hacksawed by whatever, King's War that they decided they wanted for that year. Your 150 days off is being home and planting your own food and making your own clothes because you're just like this far above subsistence. So it's not like you're sitting on your ass just chilling like a villain, 150 days out of a year. But let's set all of that aside for a second and just grant the surface level objection and say, aren't you missing a massive blind spot in the fact that even if you are technically poor in the United States, I forget what the poverty line is, it's something like $15,000 or $12,000 a year. There are people that are making that much money a year that are living in a house with air conditioning, a refrigerator, they have a cell phone, they can watch at least some TV if they don't have all the streaming services, all of the trappings of modern life. You have a standard of living that the most powerful kings in Europe during the medieval times couldn't possibly fathom. And you have the unmitigated gall from all of those wonderful, almost magical gadgets that you think just came out of nowhere, but were the product of centuries of innovation post-capitalism, to say, well, capitalism is giving you a really shitty life compared to medieval serfs, and having absolutely no curiosity about the world and how all these fancy gadgets made your life so much better that, the Habsburgs themselves would be falling over themselves to trade their life for yours if they, had a crystal ball and could see it. And it's kind of like that theme of last week's meme that we're talking about. These people just have no appreciation for anything.
Well,
they just have utter entitlement through and through.
Let's suffice it to say that it was a simpler time. They had shoes made out of cow skin. They had two genders, and that was it. Like, they literally had to just make things work. It's super simple. Now, very complicated. Now you have to be able to text while you drive and formulate opinions that are told to you on CNN and Fox News. So
I'm glad you
how the hell do you have time to do any of that now?
I'm glad you brought up the two genders things because that really does juxtapose this thing. Back then, when you had real true,
I was trying to.
I know. Back then, when you had real true hardship, you didn't have time to sit down there or to sit around and think of ways to figure out how you were oppressed.
Can I put it more crass?
Yeah.
You didn't have a billion different things to put your dick in and find out whether or not you liked it or not.
Correct.
Or vice versa.
So, modern society just sitting around trying to figure out who's more oppressed all the time should be all you need to know to realize that meme is absolute
And by the way,
bullshit.
it took dedication to keep your line going back then. You know how often they bathed? Probably how often they had a day off. You're talking 150 days out of the year. There's 350 days. They might have bathed.
I bet they bathed less than that.
If a chick has worked all day or a dude has worked all day, you really want to smell that? No, he's got to get in the shower. He's got to clean up. And if I see one follicle on your genitalia, I'm going to have you shave it off. That's how prim and prissy we are nowadays. Think about, they had to commit back then to make a human. Yeah. Oh, and then guess what? When they're impoverished, they had to feed said human until it reached, or you just have a bunch of them and see which ones survive.
Yeah. You're worried about child labor? Every kid they popped out at the second they could walk needed to be out in the field working to be able to pull their own weight and contribute to the family so that they all didn't starve to death.
Who has diapers? Just shit in the field. It's free fertilizer. Shut up. Get out there.
Anyway, if you were one of the people, and again, self-selected group that follows and watches this podcast are not the people that would be drawn in by a brain-dead meme like that. But if you were, Stop it. Just stop it. And if you have friends and family, don't tell them to stop it and send them over to Weapons of Meme Destruction to destroy all their memes that are stupid.
Because after all, we're a family broadcast.
That's right.